In this video, we're going to be talking about how to find the product of functions. And we're going to be walking through a couple of examples so that we get really comfortable with doing this. Now, when we talk about the product of functions, remember that product means multiplication. So when we say the product of functions, what we mean is whatever we get when we multiply those functions together. And often you'll see the product of two functions written in this way. So if we have the functions f of x and g of x, so those are two separate functions, and then we want to multiply them together, a lot of times we'll write that multiplication as f g of x, which just tells us that we're multiplying the functions f and g. You might also see it written as something like f of x times g of x this way, but f g of x in this form is more appropriate, more common than f of x times g of x. So this means multiply the functions together. So let's take a really simple example here. If we're told find f g of x, the product of f and g, and we know that f of x is equal to 3 and that g of x is equal to 4, then that means we just take the product of those two. We multiply them together. So we get 3 times 4, or 12. So the product of the two functions is 12. And that's obviously really easy for us to do if we have real numbers here. But we can also do this with variables. So if we have functions where f of x is equal to x, a variable, and g of x is equal to x plus 1, then we can find the product f g of x simply by multiplying the right-hand sides here, just like we did when we took 3 times 4. So instead of 3 times 4, this time we'll take x times x plus 1. So we would say x multiplied by x plus 1. And we could leave the product that way, or we could distribute the x across the x plus 1 and multiply this out. So x times x here will give us x squared. And then x times 1 will give us x. So we say plus x. So we could write it either way, x times the quantity x plus 1 or x squared plus x. Both of those represent the product of f and g, or what we get when we multiply the functions f of x and g of x together. Now you'll notice here that everything we've dealt with up to this point is always a function f in terms of the variable x, or a function g in terms of the variable x. We write that as f of x or g of x, and then we are asked to find the product f times g of x. So we always have here these x's in these first two problems. But sometimes you're going to be asked to find something like this, fg of 2. And when that's the case, basically what we're being asked for is to find the product of the functions, but find that product evaluated at x equals 2. And when that's the case, there's two ways that we can go about this. So we can either find the product first. So notice here that we have the same set of functions that we did in this last example. And we could go ahead and find their product, and we would get x squared plus x, or x times quantity x plus 1. So we could find the product first and say f g of x we know is x squared plus x. So we could do that first. And then we could say we want to evaluate this function at x equals 2. In other words, notice here that we have fg of x versus here we have fg of 2. So we're really just replacing this x with 2, which means we're plugging in the value x equals 2 for x. So we want to replace x everywhere with 2. And when we do that, we get fg of 2 is equal to 2 squared plus 2, or 4 plus 2, or 6. So in this process, we first multiplied the functions together to find the product, fg of x. Then we evaluated the product at x equals 2 to find the value here, 6. But we can also do it the opposite way. In other words, we know we want to evaluate it too. We can go ahead and evaluate the original functions, f of x and g of x, at 2 first, and then multiply those together to get the product. So if we do it that way, here's what that would look like. We would say f of 2 is equal to, here we're plugging in 2 for x, and so we would just get 2. We also want to plug 2 into g of x, So we'd get g of 2, or the function g at x equals 2, is equal to, instead of x plus 1, we're plugging in 2 for x, so we'd get 2 plus 1, and we'd get 3. And then when we multiply these together, we get fg of 2 is equal to 6. 2 times 3 gives us 6. So notice how either way, whether we multiplied the functions f of x and g of x together to get the product, and then evaluated it 2, or we evaluated both of the original functions at 2 first, and then multiplied those results together to get the product, either way, we come out with the same answer. So that's some more arithmetic with functions, and that's how you find the product of two functions.